Okay, I think it's now better. Yeah, I think it's now better. Let me just turn on my camera as well. Um, yeah, so welcome, Kuma. So we have Kim and I on the call, part of the Horizon Forum. Glad to have you. Oh, nice. So how's been life? How's been work and your community projects around information technology?
Um, if the last time you saw me was 2019, then a lot's changed. So I think the first big change is the amount of community work I do is not as much as before.
Yeah,
I think post post Agora Code, we went into doing obviously the software developers conference, and we did that 2 years in a row. Then
yeah,
COVID hit, we didn't do it for a year. We still have conversations around bringing it right back, but obviously it's a little bit difficult. And I guess I'll get into why it's a bit difficult later, especially in a country like ours, where a lot of the time, if you're doing a lot of this community work, it's pretty hard to fund them. So it gets a little crazy. So I think after Agora we did DevCon for a while. Then obviously COVID hit and we haven't done that since then. Then around the same time, I think we're doing DevCon. I stepped into like a new area. I started doing more podcasting. So we started a podcast called CodeCast. I do that with Cynthia
yeah,
and Elias. Elias, who's now relocated. Elias is in Rwanda now, so we see him every now and then. Yeah, like when I think about how far back we've come from, and just thinking about everybody we used to do a lot of work with, and how we've stepped into new spaces and we've grown into a lot of different areas, and I'm quite happy to see that.
yeah,
So lately, I do not as consistent with podcasts still, but I try and do podcasts to support the community work because I don't have as much time as I used to. Work gets a little demanding, so my time is spread too thin. But I still attend a lot of community events when I can. And of course, try and support as many people as possible as well through however I can, whether it's connecting them to different people, um, linking them with job opportunities, and so on and so forth. So I pretty much spend my time doing that. Most recently, though, post game jams, like I haven't attended a game jam in a few years,
yeah,
but I still have that passion for game development. We ventured into building our own game. So we have a mobile game that we launched in December last year, which is also really focused around community as well. Like for for trivia games to work or party games to work, you really have to spend a lot of time engaging the community and trying to get them to sort of like buy into it, which is what we've been doing. So like we try and do like quarterly game nights to
yeah,
sort of like get people to like playing the game and getting comfortable and getting feedback and that sort of thing. So it's yeah, I going back to the game jams, it was so easy to spend 48 hours in a room with the same people, coding away, and just like uploading a game and being proud. Turning that into a business is a totally different ballgame. It doesn't help that we live in a country like Zambia where accessing different markets, the US, Europe, the rest of Africa, turns out is not as easy as I thought. Not just a matter of just publishing your game and suddenly it's everywhere you want it to be. You have to spend so much time learning marketing and stuff like that. So like, yeah, it's crazy. So that's really what I've been doing since then. Busier now, and
yeah.
I guess it's like a getting that thing, more responsibilities. The curse of black tax forces you to really just make sure you have the income running as much as possible, so you can, and not disappoint any grandparents.
Wow. Yeah, yeah. That's quite some interesting journey. Like, and I like the resilience and how you still hopped on from this to that. And I think even Black Tax is still sort of still helping out, empowering more people. So, which is still like a big passion for growth.
Depending on who you're asking, to be honest, we
Yeah.
all have different perspectives. Maybe not the right platform for me to share my perspective, but we all have different perspectives of it and how it should work.
Yeah, true. I guess even the extent.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting. What
Okay.
about you? What have you been up to?
Well, so in my case, so after university, I went into system administration. I interned for a bit, and then I eventually got into IT auditing. Then I also did a bit of data analytics while doing that, and yeah, so I think for the last 3 years, it's been mostly IT audit. Uh, and then community-wise, we some friends and I actually began the Zambian AI community. So we're trying to um, increase, actually strengthen that voice around artificial intelligence, data science across Zambia. So I think most of community work around IT was actually centered around that. And then I guess here we are having the recording where we're actually hoping to say, like, the recordings have to put together, or put up, eventually will actually be something that will help other young people in future, not so far from now, in choosing which path of IT to follow. Like, especially that IT has grown despite the challenges, but I feel like we now can diversify beyond just systems admin, software development. Like you can choose so many more branches, IT security, and lots more, and perhaps even actually merging with a bit of other professional qualifications and forming new streams. Yeah. Then we have Kima.
Oh, hello. I'm sure this is my first time ever meeting you, and you guys seem acquainted already. So, this is Kima. I'm an editor at Verbit. It's an AI company. So I've worked remotely since April 2020, and I met Joseph and Tumelo via LinkedIn, based off of just mutual interest, and then we came together, and I've been also studying mechatronics engineering and pursuing my degree, of which has been really rough lately. It's not a common engineering field already in Zambia. It's a very scarce one, so it's quite hard on you because you don't really know how to balance the workload of like 3 engineering fields in one. So that's what I've been building up. So I'm hoping to get the degree and then most likely focus on something totally different from engineering. I'm not looking forward to going too deep into it, but currently I'm looking to work in any software space or any IT or computer space, which I think is more interesting, and I think it's more flexible when it comes to job types. That's, yeah, basically me.
You know, it's interesting that you mentioned a lot of things that we generally had, well, I generally had challenges with. First of all, picking careers, stepping into the career itself, and then progressing. One key thing that okay, so I'm going to go back into the past. I realized it's there from 2019. So I'm going to go back into the past a little just so I can maybe give the audience a little background of where I've come from and how I relate to the challenges you just mentioned. And I think the biggest thing that you just talked about is how your career choice is so rare and there aren't a lot of people that are doing it. For me, the biggest thing I felt I had as an advantage, like getting through and getting into the work environment was community. We had a lot of people around. I had a lot of people around me doing the same thing I was doing. That's how I met Joseph. So like we spent a lot of weekends together, exchanging knowledge and that sort of thing. And I sort of helped build my networks and built the skills that I eventually needed to use in the workplace, which is pretty interesting. I don't know how you're dealing with that, but it must be really lonely. It's a real thing, actually, being alone in a community and whatnot. So, like when I started, So first of all, me getting into like the software space was really, I won't say accidental. It was always a hobby for me. Like when I was younger, I think I got into like computers because my grandfather got me this computer when I was really young, and then I abused it and it broke down, and I needed someone to fix it, and they were going to charge me a shitload of money, which I didn't have. Sorry, excuse my French, which I didn't have, and I ended up learning how to fix it myself. And then eventually, like I got into that space and I started playing around with a lot of these things as time went on. But when I got into high school, my initial choice actually was to do economics. That's what I wanted to do. I always wanted to do economics actually. So like I was dead set on that until like 11th grade or 10th grade. And I'm looking at my subject combination. I'm told, okay, you might not do economics. You have to pick something else. Because I was already like in a very sciencey background. So it was really difficult for me at the time anyway, or so I was told. And then eventually I decided on just making my hobby a career. So then I decided on doing software engineering. Getting into uni was I was really now just dead set on that. So like eventually going through uni and picking software engineering as my major, and then stepping out into like the workplace and immediately stepping into practicing software engineering, which was something that I was very lucky with because a lot of the people that I went to school with went to do sysadmin work or networking or that sort of thing when they really wanted to do it, like software engineering or software developer work. So the jobs were really, I said like it's so long ago, but the truth is like the amount of time, like the 5, 6 years that have passed since that time, we've seen so many changes in the industry that people have so many different tracks they can go into, which is what Joseph was actually alluding to. But 6 years ago, this was actually much harder. Like we didn't really have the knowledge for like, there's you can do remote work, you can enter boot camps and like add on skills and that sort of thing. It wasn't really something that was very popular. So like we all ended up just looking for jobs locally. Whatever work you found, you needed to get. Like I said, you need to survive as well. So you sort of take what you can get, and then hope that as you go on along the way, things settle into something that works. So getting into my role, I spent a lot of time in the community as well, just building networks and building on skills. And at the same time, right after uni, we started Agora Code actually. So the whole point of it was to teach people how to write code. So we were like very passionate about it. So we spent a lot of time at a place called Global Platform Zambia, which was our partner. They let us use their space as long as we maintained their computer systems, which was good for us. We had an office and we had a place to do our training, and we were working for it. So it pretty much worked very well for us. So that happened for a long time. Combining that and growing through like my career was something that worked very well. But going back to, I think Joseph that was talking about this. I hope I'll be able to provide some kind of insight, like into flip-flopping from one role to another, because I've definitely done that. Started out in software engineering, specifically building systems. After that, I switched into like a more health and analytics focused role, which still had a lot of development in it, but more or less focused towards monitoring and evaluation and that sort of thing. And then switching back into software engineering, where it was more or less like an engineering manager role. And then switching to IT, strictly IT, where I'm no longer writing code. And suddenly all I'm doing is just managing business processes and implementing IT infrastructure. So like that full circle is, when I think about it, sometimes it's really ridiculous, but I don't regret it at all, actually. I love writing code, but I love it as a hobby. I'm very pro, don't make your hobby your career. Yeah, I'm very pro that. So I don't write code anymore. I write code for myself, which I find very fulfilling. So I do a lot of passion projects. Contribute a lot to my own personal work in terms of writing code, but in terms of a career, it's not something I'm gonna step back into anytime soon. But I'm dabbling in data science, Joseph. I've been doing a lot of business intelligence and data analytics trainings and stuff like that. So I'm pretty psyched about that, but mostly just combining that with like business intelligence, because I'm really thinking about combining like the power of analytics with making like business decisions. So towards the business side now than I am towards quote unquote like software development specifically.
Wow, that's interesting, and yeah, that's some exciting journey. And I actually totally agree with you when it comes to having like a full circle around. Because I think I realized how the difference when, like, back as an intern in system administration, like my boss would say, don't give out, like, don't just reset everyone's passwords. And you think, I mean, like, for you, you'd be thinking, oh, but they're my friends, they need help. And be like, no, they have to send emails and all those things. Like back then, it didn't make sense until like I became an auditor. And then I'm now the one who's pushing to say, why did this person get access without the proper controls? So like getting to know the different parts of IT actually get to give you like a better appreciation of what everyone actually does and why they're actually doing that. And yeah, I think the Agora community journey was also interesting. I think even the CodeCast one was like, yeah, like I think that was something that was really cool and looking. I think you used to have it on Thursdays, right? Like it would always be something that you'd be looking out for towards. Like you'd be like, oh, the next podcast recording will be available this week. Yeah, so it's really been some interesting journey and service that you put out there.
You know, you have no idea how much it pains me to hear you say used to because of how inconsistent we've been the last 2 years. And like there've been so many things that have happened in the background that no one really knows about. But Cynthia and I have been having conversations this year about possibly committing to that again. So it's something that definitely we don't want to kill off this yet. So I hope that you will still listen to us when we start publishing more episodes.
Definitely, definitely. Yeah. So maybe you can tell us more about like some of the key lessons that you learned as you switched between roles and maybe like if someone were to or if you were to begin afresh today, like where would you want to immediately begin from?
That's a difficult one. It's a difficult one because generally I don't have any regrets about most of the decisions I make. So there's not really anything I'd say I'd do differently. But I would say, like sitting in the position I am now and looking back, a lot of the advice I'd probably give is for people to think broader. I have a few people in my family who want to do the same things I do, and usually the advice is to not worry too much about where you end up, but just be very open-minded to trying so many different things. There's so many possibilities now. Like I said, there's so many opportunities to work remotely, and even locally, there's so many companies that are stepping into the market, and they're offering a lot more focused roles. I like to think of creators specifically because I think they have the most challenges in terms of finding roles and finding the things that give them the most fulfilling kind of work. Now you see them having more opportunities, and we also see people in our field giving themselves more opportunities as well. I think the first thing is just to be open-minded. A lot of the things we learn, especially in uni, are really just a foundation for many greater things, I think, and many greater opportunities. So if I had to think right now and sort of decide what I would do differently, I think, weirdly enough, I think the first thing is I probably wouldn't have started work at the time I did. I would have taken a bit more time because when I finished uni, I spent like 2 weeks at home and I was in a full-time job right after 2 weeks. I didn't really have that time to sort of like settle into like you just finished uni, like take time and like figure out what you want to do, spend more time in the community learning a few things, intern at different places if you can, and that sort of thing. So like in a way, even though it was the right thing to do at that time, I guess if it were to happen now, I'd probably wait and spend a lot more time trying out different stuff and not committing to one specific thing. Maybe that would be the first thing. But the key thing I think I need to acknowledge that everybody has a different path, everybody has different motivations, everybody has different circumstances. So sometimes we don't really have a choice, but to take what's given to us. Maybe the other thing is learning, like not not slacking around growing skills, like not waiting to be told what to do, but to go searching for the knowledge and also just asking a lot of questions. I think that's one thing I didn't do that I feel like I could do differently, I guess.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. And yeah, talking of remote working, Kima actually has some experience around that. And yeah, if you don't mind, Kima, I can actually share how that has been. I mean, that how that went for you.
Oh, wow. It's something that I think is really, really helpful. I prefer that to like commuting to anywhere any day. First of all, because of my own um, comfortability, I prefer to be in also an environmental perspective. The more people you have transporting to work each day, the more pollution you're causing to the environment and blah, blah, blah. This is a common reason. I also think it helps. I can consider the pros, especially because I'd say what I enjoyed the most. I think it's very comfortable and it's also worthwhile depending on how you live. If you have that environment that's conducive to work on your own independently, if it means sitting down for a couple hours, taking breaks in the comfort of your own home, and you get to, the only sad part is you don't get to physically meet people. But I was working during the pandemic, starting at around April 2020, the pandemic part was then quite really the biggest headline of the news. So you'd consider any type of work that allowed you to be safe from COVID and allowed you to also make money. And I also enjoyed my employers, let's just say. They were the biggest motivators and they were the biggest source of like commitment I had. I was very punctual. They made sure they made a community that made you feel included. Your opinion was heard, no matter what project you worked on. Meaning they'll do a survey later on to find out what you feel about it generally. So you get to express yourself. Also, I think it takes a lot of wits and nerve sometimes to handle it. It's not too common for Zambian workspaces so far. But for fields in the tech space and in the software space, I'm sure that is something that already is embedded in it. Yeah, but I think I'm more than willing to communicate with people who have had a similar experience and are willing to grow such a culture in Zambia and see how we can work through it. I guess that's all I have to say.
That's that's
Yeah.
interesting. It's interesting. And yeah, maybe back to you, Kuma. So, yeah, maybe like what from the roles that you actually mentioned you had actually like taken along the way, maybe like which of these roles came during the time of the pandemic and how did that maybe change your perspective around IT? Did it actually make you want to do maybe like to do less of other types of roles than others? And how did maybe like COVID impact the career decision?
So I worked at one organization throughout the entire pandemic. So I think I switched jobs just at the start of 2019 or 2020. 2019 actually, right at the start of 2019, I switched roles. I went into the nonprofit space, and I think the pandemic caught me while I was there actually. So it was really at the time it was a lot of fulfilling work. So I wasn't really looking for anything else. I guess for me, one of the maybe I should start from here. like what do I consider most important for me when I'm like looking for a role or like I'm in a job? It's usually like impact. You know, all the cliche things they say about millennials wanting to have impact on the world, ABCD. I feel
Yeah.
like I sort of embody that in a sense. Because even like moving from because my first job was in insurance. So moving from insurance into the non-profit space, it was more or less like impact. It was the kind of work I would be doing and the kind of impact it would have on like people. So that was really like my motivation in terms of switching roles at that time. So even during the pandemic, I think it was more and more evident how important the work we were doing, because essentially what we're doing was just like automating business processes and just exposing services online that otherwise were manual at the time. So like COVID really like necessitated the need for us to make sure such kind of infrastructure was in place. So it was very fulfilling for me to work at that time. I think for me, it in terms of like what specific roles, I wouldn't say I've had that struggle now and not earlier, like in terms of where I wanted to land
Yeah.
and settle. Like usually I I don't know why it started now, but it started now. But then back during the pandemic, it wasn't such a big issue for me. I was okay. I was good. I was happy. I wasn't really looking for any particular role except one that provides a lot of impact. So it didn't really matter what I was doing as long as the end result was helpful to some people. Yeah, I think in a nutshell, yeah, it was really just that. Nothing really like complex about it or anything like that.
Well, and it sounds a bit ironic, like where it's like an inner struggle where you talked about how you've been wanting not to combine passion with work, but on the other side, you're still striving for impact. And how have you been keeping that balance?
You see, look, I won't lie to you. I think I'll try and be straight. Like as you get older, the balance sort of just skews to stability. You're now looking for stability. So sometimes you end up in spaces where you're not the most happy from a career perspective, but it provides a lot of stability. So then your thinking sort of skews towards that direction. But in terms of balance, I think what really helped was the fact that I did a lot of work outside of my job. Like I did a lot of passion projects outside my job. I was doing a lot of community work as well. So I found a lot of joy in doing that. I started the podcast in 2020. We were doing actually no, that's 2019 actually. So like we
Pardon
were
me,
doing that as
just
well,
before you
and that
continue.
provided a lot of
Sorry.
like yeah.
What niche are you building with your podcast? What are your areas of interest? What are you
Okay,
focusing on, or is
so
it just random? Yeah.
So that's a very good question. So when we started, we were very software engineering focused. We were strictly software engineering. Our topics were very skewed towards how to build stuff, like sort of like just providing an insight into what sort of technologies were available and how you can take advantage of them. But then with our audience, what we found was that a lot of people that were listening to us were more like entry into tech level kind of audiences. So we expanded that into more or less, I don't want to call it pop culture, like tech pop culture, but it was like more or less like um, day-to-day topics around tech. So dumbing it down a lot from just engineering. And then I think over time we sort of just settled into yeah, like a combination of both. So what we look to provide is just an insight into what's happening on the continent of Africa in terms of what technology, what are people building, and then we also try and focus a lot on the soft skills as well. What are the struggles that we have on a day-to-day basis? I remember one of my favorite episodes is one we did with a life coach by the name of Yuna. It was a very good episode because it wasn't very tech focused, but it was around issues that affect our day-to-day choices around how we go about our careers and how we train our minds and that sort of thing. So we're not really like, in a way, we're a niche. That it's a niche market in Zambia, to be honest. Not a lot of people like in the tech space. So yeah, that's really our focus, providing access to information about technology, providing access to people that have built technology and how they've done it and how they handle their day-to-day business. Pretty much is what we've chosen to focus on.
All right.
That's interesting.
How
And
big do you want this to go? How,
okay.
what is the vision for the podcast? What is your ultimate goal, or where are you heading? Yeah, sorry.
Okay, I'll be very honest. I mean, we focus on 4 minutes, right? Because of where we're coming from in terms of our space in the community, like Cynthia is one of the people that started Facebook developer circles in Zambia. So like, because of that background in community that we have a strong affinity to providing platforms for education and providing linkages as well. So really what we're looking for in the future is to be that gap that then is able to connect technology enthusiasts within Africa contextually to us here in Zambia as well. We're looking to be that media source for that kind of information and just providing that level of experience. One of the biggest challenges I'd say I had personally, listening to podcasts generally, was the lack of relatability. I don't know if that's a word, but being able to relate to a lot of the experiences people had. I mean, listening to podcasts from the US is amazing, like so many amazing stories, but I couldn't relate to a lot of them because my context is extremely different. And being able to tell my own story and being able to tell other people's story is something that was very interesting for us at the time. And it's something that was very attractive. So even when you look at the kind of episodes we've done, it's sort of like very unscripted, very like raw, and looking to get people's like emotions as they're reacting to like certain topics and stuff like that. So that's pretty much what we hope to do. Just be the best storytellers we can and hopefully grow into a space that is able to, first of all, not just be able to educate people about technology, but also provide that linkage as well. And I can give you an insight on the kinds of people that we've been talking to over the last few months. This is people that are looking to provide some level of technological assistance to people in different markets. And they're looking to people in the media space to help them connect them with people that need that sort of like assistance and stuff like that. So that's really where we want to go. We want to be able to primarily tell our story and tell the stories of others, but also just be able to provide some sort of linkages within the communities themselves and sort of like bridge the gaps that currently exist within these silos of knowledge. Like we're looking at, primarily we still Zambian stories, right? But now we're looking at the entire Africa. Like what stories are there within Africa that we can tell? Because our contexts are pretty much the same. The problems that you have in Nigeria, for example, or in Kenya or Tanzania or Uganda, which are some of the biggest markets, by the way, for technology in Africa. Some of the challenges that we have here, you know, but maybe they've gone a step further and been able to solve a particular challenge that we may have. And we want to learn from that experience as well and see how we can sort of marry that with our context and build a better industry and a better community as well. I don't know if that answers your question.
Oh, sure. That's really great. Joseph, did you want to ask the question?
Yeah. So actually, yeah. I think maybe in terms of, I guess also just a background to our listeners and viewers of whom Mukuma actually is. I think in a way would actually say he among us like the forerunners of like the whole community impact around IT back when like we didn't have much of a voice, especially among us like the young people. Yeah, like you stepped in, we had Cynthia and lots of other people since then. I mean, like back then, it's just been a few years, but as you said, like a lot has happened like in a very short space of time. From the communities that we have so far, like locally in Zambia, and looking at maybe, I guess maybe a background to how you came about thinking of the idea of the developer conference back in 2018 and I think 17. Would you call the impact united, or is it fragmented across Zambia, like in terms of the voices that we currently have, and what's been our growth in terms of uniting and having a stronger front together as a tech community in Zambia, and what can we learn from other countries within Africa?
Because that question is really loaded. There's like lots of different aspects to that. I'll try and tackle as many of them as I can. And thank you for the kind words as well.
Sure.
So like really, I'll start from Agora Code itself, which started, I think, when I was in uni. The idea itself started when I was in uni. So we generally had a community problem. Like we didn't have a lot of places we could go to ask for help. I generally struggled through uni because I had so few people I could ask for help when I needed it. So that's really where the idea started from. And if I'm going to be completely honest with you, I was drunk when it started. So like it was really one of those moments where a friend of mine pulls up to me and he says, "Yo, we really need to do this." And you know how I don't know if you've heard stories about this, but people come up with ideas when they're drunk and like we talk about it and we forget about it. But for us, it's something that stayed and continued. And I remember having a meeting at my uncle's backyard, and we had like 10 people come and join the first meetup. And from there, it sort of like just gave us like some hope. And then eventually we started doing it more regularly. So we were very lucky when a friend of mine introduced me to Global Platform, and we had our first meeting there, and they let us use the space. So that really gave us a springboard because then they provided the internet connection, they provided the spaces, the resources to do it as well. A lot of the work that we had to do was more or less in the community, like bringing people to events. So I'll try and tackle your question in parts, and I'll combine some with others. So I'll start with the fragmentation. So generally, this is a general problem with society anyway. Like there's a lot of fragmentation that can happen, mostly because people's values align with whoever they want to, spend their time with, or with people with the same values as them. So this generally happens in tech as well. So a lot of the challenges that come with building is not only do you have to have like the dedication to doing it on a regular basis, consistency is key. The resources as well from a money perspective to be able to host the meetups if you don't have any funding, like there are all those factors that come into play. And you also have to factor in that people have different interests, and you can't provide everyone with like everything they need. So you kind of have to focus on a niche. So we tried to provide everything like in-house. I think at some point we started doing even Linux community meetups, and we think we did like 3 meetups and it didn't work so well for us, so we eventually stopped. But there's a lot of different communities providing different things. So you have your data science community, for example, you've got your web developer community, for example, and within that you've got your React, you've got your Vue community, you've got all those different communities that are fragmented within the tech space. But then the biggest challenge we had was that there weren't enough people. So because there weren't enough people, it meant that one person wanted to go to all the meetups at once. You find the meetup is on the same day, and there's 3 different meetups happening in 3 different places. How are you gonna split yourself and be in 3 different places at once? We had a specialization problem. Everybody was a generalist. I'm still a generalist actually. So like you want to pick up as many skills as possible, but the community just doesn't allow you to do that because the events are all happening on the same day. So that was really like the kind of fragmentation that really happened. Not to say that people didn't want to work together. Like we all wanted to work together, and it showed when we came together and decided we wanted to do the conference. So the conference was really um, us trying to build a pipeline or a value chain, because essentially what I learned from community work is that in as much as you want to teach the high level skills, and this was the same thing with the podcast actually, you want to teach high level skills, there's a lot of people that are still at the entry level trying to get to that point where they're at a high level. So you need to be able to start from the grassroots and try and build that pipeline all the way to when they have the opportunities for jobs. So essentially, the community work starts as the pillar or the foundation for people trying to get into tech, to teach them those skills, to teach them the things that they need to know to be able to get into the industry, and then end up at the conference, which is where you bring the industry together and then have a space where people can network and gain opportunities. So build the skills, put them in a place where they can then market themselves and then begin to like grasp at opportunities that exist within the space. So really the goal was to build a value chain, pretty much from the foundation all the way up to when they're ready to enter like the workspace, essentially. So there are a lot of moving parts, and that's really been one of the biggest challenges. See, the thing is, even in your own career, right? When you start off just after uni, you have a lot of time. You have a lot of time to do so many things. But as you keep progressing in your career and you keep growing, you have less time to do community work and your role changes within the ecosystem. So you go from being the one that's offering training opportunities to being the employer, for example. So when you look at your journey, like how are you moving and how are you affecting the people that you're leaving behind? So essentially, what role are you playing in the ecosystem? Like not what we're trying to do as well is just making sure that as people are passing through this pipeline, right, they're also like growing with that mentality of being able to provide opportunities for others. Like when we were like getting into the space, it was really a fend for yourself kind of scenario. So we just thought maybe it shouldn't be that bad. It should be at least half bad, and there's opportunities for people to help you out and help you grow and stuff like that. So I think that pretty much covers all the questions. I hope.
Yes, it does.
The last one I think was, what can we do better?
Yeah,
If I'm not mistaken.
yeah.
Okay, I think I covered that one as well. What can we do better? I think it's really identifying where you are in your journey personally and seeing how that can affect others. Like I'll give an example of what you guys are trying to do. You're providing long-lasting content for people to come back to and pretty much learn, right? So it's really about identifying what role you're playing in the community and seeing how much impact it has on others as well. And if you have the time, like dive nose deep into like community work and do as much of it as possible. That's really like the only thing you can do. Like find your space within the community and then take advantage of it and try and do your part.
That's very interesting. And do you mind maybe just giving us a tip of the surprise that you mentioned? Like what's yet to come for the podcast?
Um, so I'm not gonna dive too deep into it. Lately I'm starting to believe in the whole concept of jinx. So I'm not gonna dive into it too deep, but essentially I think what we're trying to do now is um extend our reach into Africa and being able to bring what Africa can offer back home. There's lots of opportunities for people to network and sort of grow the community outward. Personally, I've never believed that we should like sort of be confined to the borders that we have. Communities extend beyond borders, and it's extremely possible to build a community that stretches across all four corners of the continent. So that's really what our goal is at the moment. I think first of all, what we really want to do is just establish consistency, and then from there we can begin to surprise you guys along the way.
Waiting for that surprise. And yeah, we'll obviously be like so eager to listen and tune in like just as people. Kima, over to you.
I just wanted to find out what has been your worst experience working around any of the circles you've mentioned in any field? What valuable lesson did you grab, or what um, was just the worst experience, the lowest moments of like trying to diversify yourself?
I think my okay, it's very difficult for me to talk about my worst experiences um without first of all sort of giving a hint as to where that worst experience happened. So like for something like that, you'd probably need to catch me somewhere in a different environment and I'd be able to talk about that. But I can't talk to you about my lowest. I think my lowest points are really around being able to just balance your work and your social life, I guess. Just not getting lost in the whole idea of writing code and, like just getting lost in it because burnout is real, depression is real as well. So like find the balance. There's so many interesting things to do out there other than write code, you know. I think Cynthia and I talk about it on some of our episodes where I think there's a couple of hobbies that we took up that we talk about very openly. And I think one of them for me, I spoke about very openly was how at some point I had a real passion for alcohol and like trying out different alcohol and I was very passionate about it. And I think I even built a hobby project on it. I had a cocktail site with over 10,000 recipes that I was like offering out to the world at some point. So it's really just finding joy in the little things away from work, to be able to just balance out your life and not get lost in the whole. There's a word we use for it, being a 10x engineer. Like it's overrated. Nah, it's overrated, fam. Just enjoy life. That's pretty much it. So my lowest points stem from a lack of balance.
Okay. All right. I guess that answers the question. Joseph, I saw your screen. Are you still with us?
Yeah. I hope you can see me.
No, yeah. You're mobile now. I thought you weren't moving at all. Anyway, I guess I want to, how much time do we have? Because I wanted our guests to give a message for anyone listening and for anyone who is hoping to enter his field of work or one of his fields of work, that is.
Okay. I think we still have probably 15 minutes because I haven't gotten that counter yet. So
Right.
yeah, I think we still have a bit more time. But maybe before the final message, I think I have a question like so yeah, I think maybe from an angle of stability that you mentioned, of course, that's another stage that we all get to reach along the way as the career evolves and as maybe like life goes on. Is it like from your own experience, from your own opinion, like is it necessary to switch roles as maybe like you settle down, have a family, or do you think like the type of work that you're doing doesn't really impact maybe so much like in terms of how you get to have that balance and the stability. So is maybe like your stability dependent on the role or maybe it role in terms of maybe specialization or even just the position itself? Okay, of course, yeah, the position will be there, but is it dependent on the field you're in or can you still make it maybe in certain fields? And what things do you think would actually help you gain that stability as you maybe like begin to settle down in a family?
Okay, I'm not sure I understand your question.
Okay, maybe let me just repeat. So so like you talked about stability as one of the things that you're now looking towards having and which you're working on. And you talked about how balance has actually been a key factor in helping you like make it through most of like the projects and activities that you've actually had. So for someone who's moving on, maybe like settling down in life as their career progresses, is it necessary to switch roles to something that's less busy, or do you think maybe like you can still find that balance even though you're like in a certain role that you feel something that maybe speaks more to you?
Well, in my context, the stability came in the form of, I guess, specialization, just being able to identify what it is that I wanted to focus on for my career. And it sort of helped me like sort of chart a path in terms of how I want to like progress and where I want to be. So that's what stability looked like for me. I mean, I'm not married yet, or I don't have any kids yet, so I can't really speak for what that looks like. Um, but like I said, in my context, like moving through the different roles, uh, I would probably say again, like our realities are different. For me, moving between different roles taught me what I wanted. It taught me a lot about where I wanted my career to go, and it also taught me, I guess, patience in a way. The biggest thing, I guess, that would come out of everything is that it's sort of very fluid and very contextual. Like for some people, maybe stability is your sysadmin job that you do for the rest of your life, and you settle into that and you find opportunities within that. But ideally, at the end of it all, I guess, is to find what you're passionate about, and that's what would give you like some level of stability in whatever form that looks like for you. And for me, it's looked like um, the general IT space is where I want to be, and I'm focusing a lot on like how my background will help me impact the business. So essentially, like coming from like a primarily an engineering background, stepping into more or less like a very business oriented side to my career, I think it's sort of helped me settle. And I'd say to anyone that's really listening, like the early days are really for exploring and figuring out what you're really passionate about. And then once you figure out what you're really passionate about, you sort of spend your time perfecting your craft. Because at the end of the day, I know that a lot of people can be generalists and it works out for them. Sometimes being a specialist is more beneficial to you progressing throughout your career. The one key thing though I'd like to say is that one thing you should never be afraid of is starting over. I've started over many times, and it's something that I guess I do very well. Just being able to hit that reset and try and chart a new path. So while we are chasing sort of like this utopia of a career that we're looking for, at the end of the day, it's really important to also be open to change and being able to adapt in different environments, because sometimes blessings are hidden in the places we didn't know existed. So that's also one thing I believe in. Just keeping an open mind and just making sure that even though, like I said, we're chasing this utopia job or whatever, we stay open-minded and we stay pretty much open to what life throws at us.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I think that answers my question. Yeah, over to you, Kima, for your question. Unless if you have something for us, Mkuma.
Not presently, actually. Maybe just thank you again. Um, I've watched a couple of the episodes you guys, and actually, I enjoy it. Joseph, I don't know how you do audit. For the life of me, I can never find myself in audit. It's one thing that I never in my life will I ever do audit. Like that one is tricky. I know you should never say never, but the bank audit, nah, not for me.
Actually, that's what I've been telling Kim and Timelo to say. Like in future, giving career advice to children, never mention IT audit or any form of audit. It almost takes your life away. Yeah. Yeah, I think Kima, yeah, we can come back to you for a final question.
Actually, I do not have any. I expected Kuma to have a question for either of us, but back and forth, I guess we'll just ask what would be your best advice to anyone who wants to be, who is entering your field or is an aspirant for your career path?
Which one of my career paths? Okay, just
Oh my goodness.
So really, the really the biggest advice is just stay open-minded. Like there's lots of different tracks. I think there's lots of opportunities with like uh, Google, Andela, like all these different tracks that they provide that also just help you teach you like skills and stuff like that. So just be open to like doing boot camps, be open to joining communities, be open to meeting as many people as possible. That really like jumpstarts your career. Like it really helps you move from A to Z really quickly. So it worked for a lot of people I know. It worked for the people that are really close to me, and it worked for me at some degree as well. So that's really the best advice I can give you. Just stay open-minded and experiment as much as possible. That's really the only thing.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm actually glad we got to have this call, and yeah, and we're honored to have had time with you, Mkuma, and yeah, getting to share what you've been up to and just your whole journey, like in the IT space.
Is that a wrap?
We'll catch up with you guys another time.
Sure, sure.
Right.
Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
Bye.